You're listening to Up to the Mic. If you want to learn about the struggles and triumphs of starting a business, performing for sold-out arenas, or inspiring those you lead, Up to the Mic is the show for you. Throw on some headphones and get ready to listen as our host, Vinny Hale, sits down to showcase the stories of those who deserve their stories be told. From young entrepreneurs to critically acclaimed musicians and so much more, Vinny helps compile a season of interviews that inspire listeners to follow in the footsteps of his guest. My next guest left his full-time job as a technology consultant to pursue his passion of public speaking. Currently, he travels around the U.S. and Canada performing speaking engagements and personalized coaching for both individual and corporate clients. Not only that, he's the founder of MasterTalk, a coaching and social media platform aiming to teach others the necessary skills to become a successful communicator. Please welcome my next guest, Brenden Kumarasamy. Thank you so much for being here today, man. It is a pleasure to have you on.
The pleasure is absolutely mine, Vinny. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm sure the listeners know a little bit about you now that I've given that excellent intro of yourself. You have a lot to be proud of. But before we dive into all that you're up to these days, if anybody that listens to the podcast knows, they know we like to get down to the backstory to start things off. So how about you how about you open up and give the listeners a little bit about your upbringing, what your life was like prior to Master Talk and all things that you do these days?
Yeah, for sure, Vinny. Happy to talk about that. So for me, the journey started in college. I went to business school to study accounting. I thought I was going to be a numbers guy my whole life. And I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers for a year that I initially thought was a water bottling company. That's how lost I was. So I thought I was going to be a numbers junkie. But then while I was in school, Vinny, I started competing in these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age are playing rugby or basketball or baseball, I wasn't really one of those guys. So I did presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started coaching a bunch of students in college on how to communicate. Not because I was any good at it, it's because they didn't have anyone better. And then I later accidentally got really good at this skill and I just started making YouTube videos and the rest was history.
Well, Brenden, I think you and I are going to we're going to find out that we have a lot more in common than we might have initially spoken about prior to the call. I started out my career at a Big Four firm, and then I jumped over to another Big Four firm currently, and I work at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I've been there for about 6 months now, so ironically enough, I also went to school to study accounting. And much of the reason that I actually was able to pay for school was due in part to my ability to speak in front of people. I won public speaking contest prior to getting into Texas A&M, and the scholarship money that I won is actually what was able to prompt me in large part to be able to go there. So I think I was really excited when I came across your social media and your pages, and I think that I didn't realize how much we had in common, but what we do have in common is more so lines up with what my listeners will appreciate. So it's good to hear. We don't have to dive too far into the accounting background, but maybe tell me what the change of heart was for you, opposed to just starting to help people with their personal, conversations and speaking. When did you have that, I don't know if I want to call it defining moment, but that transformation of, okay, I'm going to leave the accounting world behind. The business world's not for me, at least not in that regard. And I'm going to dive full force into Master Talk.
Yeah, for sure, Vin. I'm happy to talk about it. So for me, there was two defining moments. So the first one is the difference between us is I never went to CPA school. So I wasn't as talented as you were in public speaking until I got to college. So because of that, a lot of my tuition was paid by internships I was doing while I was doing my bachelor's. So all the internships I did in actually 80% of them were at PricewaterhouseCoopers. So that's how I got the money to fund my tuition. But how I got out of it, how I got out of accounting, was I found out about this new job that I hadn't heard of before called technology consulting / management consulting, where you get placed into companies like McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group or IBM. You get paid way more money. It's a lot more fun, and people like seeing you. So I was just like, oh, that sounds like a much better deal for me. So I got a full-time job offer to work at PwC post-grad, but I spent 7 months grabbing coffees across all the big consulting firms. And I was really fortunate. I landed a great job in the IBM's consulting division. So that prompted the leave from Price to IBM. But IBM to MasterTalk, which I think is more interesting to your
There you go. Yeah.
listeners, right, is in my last semester of college, Vinny, I had coached 60 people on how to speak. And I didn't make any money from this. It was just for fun. I never knew it was a profession. I didn't know people got paid to do this. So in my last semester, one of the 60 people that I helped coach rather, asked me a question that changed my life. And the question was, how did you learn how to speak? And I just went, what do you mean? They're like, well, you taught all of us how to speak. How did you learn how to speak? Like, did you do Toastmasters? Did you read books on this? And I looked at them and I said, nah, man, I just learned this all on the spot. So I was intuitively talented at it. I just didn't know. So what happened was so many people were asking me about this, and I was getting busy with consulting life at IBM. So I started a YouTube channel called MasterTalk because I just wanted to share the free resources because I didn't have time to coach people for free because I needed to work and do well at the job that I worked so hard to get. But then a few months after I started the YouTube channel, Vinny, I got really fortunate in life. I met the best business partner in the world, and he really showed me a path to profitability and how to turn Master Talk from just a joke, honestly, to a real business and a machine.
Well, how do you run into someone like that? Was it by chance? I know one thing that I've probably spoken about on a prior episode is I struggle sometimes with the mentorship aspect of growing into a role in the business world. Meaning, sometimes I see people further along the totem pole due in large part to the fact that they had someone to help them get there, someone as a mentor. And then I think to myself that, I need to find a mentor. And then eventually it takes long enough to where I don't really find one that's willing to grab me by the hand and show me the ropes. So I just say, screw it. And I start reading or YouTubing or whatever it is to make my own mentor. I should coin that. And, from there is where I really start to learn more about myself in a way because I never was able to have that person, or I haven't been able to yet have that person to help me out, but I know they're out there. So one, talk to myself and the listeners a little bit about what it was like to find the mentor, maybe how you went about it, if it happened by, circumstance, or if there might have been something you did proactively to go and seek them out.
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, Vinny. So here's the way that I'll level set this because you make a great point around, hey, like, what if I can't find a mentor? How do I build relationships with these people? Not everyone can get access to that. And I was definitely one of those people. And I still believe that to a certain extent. So the president of Microsoft has a great saying about luck, Vinny, which is luck is like having the right fare on a bus that keeps coming. So what he means by that is, let's say you're standing in front of a bus stop, you're waiting for the bus to come. The bus is always going to show up on time. But if you don't have enough money to get on the bus, you just can't get on the bus. So there's two parts to this. The first part was I did meet my mentor by luck. I went to an event called Summit of Greatness, which is an event hosted by the podcaster Lewis Howes. He's the host of the School of Greatness podcast. And it's in the middle of nowhere. It's in Columbus, Ohio. But the reason I went to it was because I wanted to meet Lewis. He's a big hero of mine. I've been listening to his podcast since I was 20 years old. So I just wanted to meet him. So I spent $300 on the ticket. I spent $300 on the flight, and I buy like a $30 a day Airbnb, and I fly out to the event from Montreal. So I literally I come to the States from Canada just to attend the event, and I meet Vamsi at a 5 a.m. workout. And no, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. I do not wake up at 5 a.m. I do not work out at 5 a.m. by any means, but I got up because I wanted to meet the other people who are crazy enough to wake up at 5 a.m. Because if I'm going to spend $700, which was a fortune to me back then, I'm going to make it worth my while. And the guy next to me was Vamsi. So was that luck, Vinny? Yes and no. So it was luck that, hey, it just so happens that I go to this event, I woke up in the morning, but it also wasn't luck because when he met me and he asked me what I did, I had already started the YouTube channel. So it wasn't like, oh, maybe I'm going to start this. There's just an idea. No, it's like, this is what I'm doing, but I just don't know what to do with it. And he took a liking to me because he started watching my videos that were already up on the internet. And that wasn't luck. That was me putting it up. And he said he's the exact person I've been waiting on to help my Indian clients. And that's what blew up the business and started it, frankly.
So before we go too much further, I have one question here. I want to ask what he did to kind of help propel you to that next level, what insights he shared with you. But prior to answering that, maybe take a few seconds and explain Master Talk for those of the listeners who haven't heard about it yet, because I know we kind of jumped right in, but I want to make sure everybody's got an understanding of what it is that you do and what is it that you share on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, for sure, Vinny. Absolutely. So MasterTalk is a YouTube channel I started, and we're on other socials too, like Instagram and LinkedIn now. But the main goal of the channel is how do we provide free communication tools for all of humanity? That's really the focus. I think the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach. So for me, the big thesis behind my channel and why I started it in the first place was I felt the information out there sucked on speaking. Because a lot of the info is be yourself, get up on stage, and move your hands around. I was like, this is nonsense and it's useless because that's not how I coached my 60 students on how to get better. And everything I was teaching them wasn't online. So I made videos. That's basically Master Talk. And the way I exited corporate and what it is today, still the same thing. But in addition to that, it's also a coaching practice for high level executives in corporate and entrepreneurs. So those guys pay me a lot of money to work with me privately. And that's how I built up the capital to exit my corporate job and frankly be able to do this full time. So that's the context behind that. In terms of Vomsi, Vinny, so there's so many things he's taught me. He's still my personal coach, by the way. And that's the other way to get a mentor is you got to pay for it sometimes. So in my case, it ended up being both. So Vomsi started helping me for free, and he really liked me. So he just said, because I was broke back then, I didn't have any money to buy for coaching. He just liked me. So he just said, why don't we just coach each other for free? You help me with something, I'll help you with something. And that just turned into a partnership. So today, he's not only my business partner, he's also my coach. So he's also my coach. And he's 20 years older than me, which is interesting and odd. But the big lesson he taught me, Vinny, amongst like 100, is that I could even do this full time. Like when he met me, I was a 23-year-old kid. And he literally just said, hey, you know, you could charge $3,000 for executives to coach with you, right? And I looked at him like he was the stupidest person on earth. I was like, what are you talking about, dude? Why would anyone pay me $3,000 to work with me? And he said, yeah, I'll be your first client. And he paid me money. And it completely changed my perception of the world.
That is awesome. It's inspiring because a lot of times people get a quarter of the way or partially halfway down the road to getting to that next level of where they want to be, whether that be monetizing their business or just whatever that next goal for them is. And they fall short because they just stop. And it's nice to hear a success story when someone didn't stop. They put themselves in the right places at the right time. They had the right bus fare when the bus came. And they were able to, at that point, turn a great opportunity into something more than that. They were able to monetize it. They were able to take it to the next level. So really inspiring to hear. I think that'll resonate a lot with the listeners who are out there. But I'm curious, on the topic of growing a channel, and we'll get to the actual speaking portion of it momentarily, but I'm curious, as someone who did put in the time and the effort, what would you say really helped you the most? And how long did it take for you to keep pushing through before you finally saw that light at the end of the tunnel and were like, okay, I can really keep doing this full time? Because I know, and maybe I don't want to speak for you, but typically you get halfway there, like I was saying, and it just gets harder and harder because the views aren't coming in, or the listeners aren't coming in, or the readers aren't coming in. And at that point, you've got to make the decision to commit to keep doing it and not commit to maybe what the end goal is. You just got to say, I'm going to do it every day or every week or whatever it may be. And so I'm curious, did you fall victim to something similar, and how did you overcome it?
Even to this day, Vinny, and I'm always happy to share it, I still lose money on the YouTube channel. Right. So my AdSense, and that's at 35,000 subscribers almost on my channel. I only make $200 a month on my channel, but I spend $1,000 a month producing the content, like hiring a team and whatnot. So the first part is even today, there wasn't a moment where Master Talk has gained enough listenership where I could just rely on media. So the way that I got full time was a concept that Kevin Kelly teaches that I'll push a little bit more, called 1,000 true fans. If you have 1,000 people who absolutely adore you, and I don't just mean read every blog post, watch every podcast, listen to every YouTube video. I mean, if you host an event in Montana, they'll come all the way to Montana just to see you. That type of fan base. So what he argues is you don't need 1 million people to go full time. In fact, you only need 1,000. So if 1,000 people pay $100 a year for anything that you offer them, you'll make 100 grand a year. That's more than enough for you to go full time. Except in my case, it actually wasn't 1,000; it was 100, or even less than 100. Because I charge at least $3,000 to work with me. So if you have 100 people who want to pay you that much and get the value, you're making 300 grand a year. So the reality is you only need like 25, 30 raving fans a year who are really bought into your process. And that's how I was able to exit corporate and do this full time. But the main idea here, Vinny, that I want to make sure is clear in regards to the YouTube channel is I was never going to quit. There was never going to be a moment where I was going to quit. And I'll tell you why. Because my mindset was really simple. I wanted these free videos to exist whether I made money or not. And I think that's why I was successful. And the reason I say that so confidently is because IBM was paying me pretty good money to work there. So even if MasterTalk never worked out as a business, I'd just be an executive at IBM still making those MasterTalk YouTube videos out of just paying out of pocket for my own salary. So I think that's the mindset that I think a lot of people don't have is they just try a bunch of things, but once they find the thing that they're absolutely obsessed with, they stop doing it. And I think that's really the issue.
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent. I haven't even reached that level of being able to leave my full-time job by any means. Not that that's necessarily the goal for me. I think the goal for me when I started out and even to this day, I'll say it that the goal of the podcast in and of itself is to share the stories of inspiring people like yourselves to hopefully inspire someone else to live a story-worthy life of their own. The goal for me starting the podcast, separate from that, was getting to meet great people. And so just the fact that I'm able to build up the interviewees, I guess, that I've been able to interview, it's been an exhilarating ride so far. I've met some pretty amazing people. I've been invited places. I've gotten to go and do things that I wouldn't have gotten to do otherwise. I've gotten to try things or read books or whatever it may be. And so because of that, I think that you have to find the reason, like you said, your passion, I think is the way you phrased it. And then once you do, you have to not quit, not go halfway there, like I mentioned earlier, and then just stop right there along the road. But I want to transition a little bit. So let's get back to talking about you, because I know with the social media aspect of it, with the coaching aspect of it, I was less familiar with the coaching aspect of it prior to coming into the interview. I'd watched a few of your episodes and thoroughly enjoyed it. One of the things that I'm interested in is what it looks like to be coached by you, meaning you charge at least $3,000 for a client. So I am a prospective client. I come in, I pay you $3,000. What does the next step look like? How does Brenden come in and coach me or coach my organization into becoming a better, more fluent speaker?
For sure, Vinny. So let's start with the principle that I think will help you as well. Because I mean, with the listeners you got and the readers you got, I think you go full time a lot faster than you think. Because that's what Vamsi told me, and he ended up being right. Which is a great saying that I'll share that I got from a wise old friend. And the saying is, information is free, but implementation is the fee. Information is free, but implementation is the fee. What does that mean? That means I'm always going to share my information openly and freely with the world. There isn't a question you're going to ask me where I'm going to say, actually, Vinny, I'm not going to answer that one. That's in my course or something. So I'm always going to share the information for free. But if you want me to personally handhold you to get the result and me text you and me make sure that you get the results, then you pay for that implementation. That's the difference. It's kind of the difference between, it's not a full analogy, but it's good enough, Vinny, between buying a membership at the gym versus having a personal trainer. So when you buy a membership at the gym, you're paying a little bit of money, but how many times do you really go into the gym every month? And the answer is probably, you know what, if I'm being honest, Brenden, I'm not really going to the gym that much. But there's some people who are super motivated though, and they'll keep going with the gym membership. But if you got a personal trainer, almost everyone is going to show up because the personal trainer is calling you and going, "Hey, Vinny, why didn't you show up this morning? I was waiting for you for 30 minutes." And you're like, "Oh, now I got to show up. I'm paying for that accountability." And that's how those people look like. That's the main idea. In terms of the specific coach, I mean, we don't spend the whole show on it, but I'll give you kind of an outline, which is we train executives to be bulletproof with their communication skills. So I'll take an exec, let's say in the technology space, accountings too. I got a lot of finance executives too, because they're really bad at communication. They have great salaries. They're like a VP of finance at this company, but they're horrible at comms. So they can't become CFOs without communication. So I'll get rid of their ums and ahs. I'll have them open their eyes more, change their vocal tones, help them present better, answer questions, give feedback more effectively, build better relationships with people around them. But the difference is I'll hold their hand myself in like small, intimate groups to make sure they get results. And that's how we built the business.
Wow, that's actually inspiring. I know it's a tough hurdle to overcome when you think about it in the corporate world. You don't want to feel sorry for the VP of finance at some large corporation. You know, they're doing well for themselves. But in the same respect, you also know that to become that next level that they're probably striving for, if you've made it that far, you want the CFO, the CEO, the C-suite level, they've got to have that personality trait of being able to communicate with people. That is oftentimes, and I don't want to speak for them, but like you just said, it could be the difference maker between them making that next step in their career or not. And you can bring that down to as small of a scale as you want. I mean, even in whatever, it doesn't have to be VP of finance to CFO. For any of the listeners out there that are just trying to go from entry level job to senior at a job, the ability to effectively communicate, especially if you're in some complex transactional type world like accounting, the ability to take a complex topic, digest it, and explain it to someone in an understandable way immediately sets you apart from your peers. So I have to throw that out there for my listeners. My listener group is typically a little bit younger, and so I want to make sure that they get the value. And so I had to throw that little nugget in there, but I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying. In regards to the actual speaking, tell me what it's been like coming up with the content that you make. What are some of the things you see people struggle the most with? And is that how you determine what it is that you're going to be putting out there to share with people? Do you have epiphany moments of, ooh, this is a great idea? Or do you just constantly see people struggling with similar topics and you think, this is the next type of informative piece I need to put together?
Really good observation, Vinny. You're absolutely right. So I teach a framework called QIT, which stands for questions, insights, and titles. And this is how I teach people how to create content, at least educational, what we're specialists in. So Q just means this, and I'll keep it really bare bones simple. I'm a 22-year-old kid. I got a big hoodie. I don't have any money in my pocket. I'm making videos on my couch in my mother's basement. So how do I even know what to post? I just go to the 60 people that I coached over the last 3 years. I sat down with them, told them the idea. Hey guys, I'm starting this YouTube channel on public speaking tips at a dumpling shop. And as I'm munching on dumplings for 4 hours, I just asked them, what questions do you have for me? And I just took notes. So one of the guys said, hey, Brenden, how do I present in my second language? English is really tough for me. When I'm an immigrant from, let's say, China or India or Mexico, and I'm struggling. And I'm listening to the guy's question. I'm thinking, why didn't anyone make a video on that? I mean, I speak 3 languages. I can do this. I speak English, French, and Tamil. Like, I know exactly how to solve that problem. And then I looked on YouTube. The video wasn't there, so I made it. Then somebody else said, hey, Brenden, could you break down famous speakers like Tony Robbins and Brene Brown and Simon Sinek? And I'm sitting there thinking, why didn't I think of this? This is a really good idea. So I write that down too. So I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, Vinny. Like, to your point, I'm just sitting down, and now it's through coaching conversation. When I'm coaching really advanced clients now, and they're asking me a question I don't know the answer, I find the answer and then I create a video on the answer. So in many ways, I want Master Talk to be the encyclopedia of every possible communication question that could ever get asked. That's one piece. The second piece is realizing that communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. So for us, the question is now to figure out what are those three easy balls and focus on the first one and build up that momentum over time. Oh, and just to finish QIT, I totally forgot about that. So questions, you write down the questions. I just means when I was at IBM, I would book 45 minutes in my calendar to write out the perfect answer to that one question. So I'd write like a 1,000-word blog. And then T was just titling the video. So if the question is, how do you present in a second language? The title becomes how to present in a second language.
I like it a lot. It's almost taking your experiences exactly, figuring out how that fits into the marketplace, and putting the content out there. It seems fairly shrimple, excuse me. I'll cut that out. It seems fairly simple. Um, from someone who just came into this public speaking ability almost intuitively, like you said, what do you think was something that really made you notice it aside from working with people? I'm talking about actually being in those case competitions or standing up in front of people. Was there something that you kind of started to see that set you apart from your peers, whether that be the ability to maneuver the stage, the ability to work the crowd, or hand motions, eye contact, whatever small nuanced thing it might be? Aside from just knowing that you were coaching people, was there like a particular item that stood out to you as something that made you say, okay, maybe I am pretty good at this?
Right, Vinny. So happy to share that. But I think what would be interesting as well is sharing the struggle. So the struggle is, I sucked at communication most of my life. I wish I had the story you did, winning speech competitions for college, using that to fund your intuition. That's so smart, by the way. Fund your tuition, I mean, not your intuition. I was like, wow, that's so cool. I wish I was good enough for that. So the context I forgot to add is the reason I sucked at speaking for a couple of reasons. One, I grew up in a city called Montreal in Canada. So for those who don't know, Montreal is a city where you need to know how to speak French, which is a language I did not know. So my whole life, not only did I struggle with communication, Vinny, I was presenting in a language I didn't know. So when I was in first grade or second grade, I'd look at the crowd and go, bonjour. And that was my life. That's number one. The second challenge is I have a physical disability in my left arm. It's crooked, right? You won't know that if you're listening to the audio, or even if you watch my YouTube channel. It's pretty well hidden. But I have a physical disability, so whenever I present in person, like you see, my arm's crooked. So I had a lot of insecurity as a kid. So I didn't know I was talented at speaking. And then last thing, you'd think a communication expert would study accounting. Yeah, right. Like slightly the opposite of what I do today. So the reason I realized I was talented at this, Vinny, was probably when I was 20, and that's what prompted the coaching. So the timeline was I joined this case competition program that just so happened to have the world's largest one. I don't know, that was just luck of the draw. I join as a delegate. I lose my first case competition. I get third place. My second case competition, I lose, and my third competition, I get second, but I get MVP of the delegation. So I realized after I got that second place trophy that I was actually pretty good at speaking. So then the year after, Vinny, what happened is I became an executive running that student program. It's a student run thing. And then I'm the one who brought up the idea of coaching because I realized 20% of the people we were picking for the program were brilliant, but they were really bad at communication. And I was the only person I thought could solve it, even if I had no idea how to coach them.
I love it. I love it. I'm curious to know, for your younger self or for listeners who may be in their college years or early college years, as they start prepping for interviews and they're going out for that career journey to jumpstart their career into the workforce, what is something that you would say to them that might help their conversation go a little bit smoother when they're in those interviews? And I'm thinking more behavioral in nature as opposed to technical interviews or consulting case interviews. What is something that you think might be able to set someone apart? Just maybe like I don't know if I want to use the word tip or trick, but essentially.
I'll do better, Vinny. I'll give you three.
Okay.
So the first one is really simple, and I don't know why people don't do this, is to play team. So playing team means this. When I was applying for management consulting or accounting or any of these jobs, the one thing I did differently than everyone else is I teamed up with my friends, which is counterintuitive because most people's mindset is, well, what if your friend gets the job and you don't? And I think that's a really bad way of thinking about it because if me and my friends team up together and we're spending all night reviewing each other's cover letters, interviewing each other, encouraging each other as a unit, will destroy any other candidate in the market. And that's what happened. All of us got jobs. I got a great job management consulting. Rich got a job at Deloitte. The other Rich got a job at PSB Investments and Private Equity. And MK got a job at KPMG in consulting. We all got jobs. right? And that's the first piece of advice. Play team, because even if everyone else gets jobs and you don't, who's the first person they're going to refer? Are they going to refer some schlob on the street? Are they going to refer the guy or the gal who spent all night helping them? They're going to refer you. So that's really the key. That's number one. Play team with your friends, make friends. Number two is get involved. This is very counterintuitive. The reason I got so many recommendations for interviews, Vinny, was when I was in my first year of university slash college, I would go to student associations, to places where people were getting involved in student leadership roles, and I would just be friends with them. But what happened is, as I got older, all of these buddies of mine would get placed into different companies. So I could get an interview wherever I wanted. And that's the problem that most people make as students when they're still in college, is they don't get involved because they think, oh, well, why should I get involved? I'm not going to get paid anything to do it. But you get paid something that is far in excess to money, and it's relationships. Relationships are priceless because college is the only place I believe in the world where relationships are not quid pro quo. So let's say me and you, Vinny, we meet in college. Like we're at a party and I meet you, we become best friends. That relationship is very likely to last forever because I have nothing at that point in my life, and so do you, because we're both college kids trying to make it. But when I'm at my position now at MasterTalk, I'm not saying you're like that, so I'm just saying people in general. When people reach out to me, when people talk to me, I don't know anymore if they like me for me or because of my accomplishments. That's why it's so important for you to leverage the college days. I'm not saying you can't find friends, after after college is over, but it's definitely a great ground for you to do it. And then the last tip, and I'll throw it back to you, is the question drill. Just write down a question that you'll get in an interview and practice it 5 minutes a day, and you'll be a star in 30 days.
As someone who has gone through the case interview process before, it is extremely daunting. And I don't mean to go off on a tangent and talk about that, but since we brought it up in the first place, I will say that those tips would have helped me tremendously. I did team up to a certain regard. I had a friend of mine who was 3 or 4 years older, worked in a different role in private equity, but had gone through much of the same interview process. And so being able to take what he had learned and have him share it with me was a huge help. So definitely appreciate the sentiment with team up. That is one that I think everybody would probably overlook. And so I'm here to tell you now and echo what Brenden was just saying, that it can go a lot further than you probably think it will. And as a unit, you'll crush the competition, I think, in your words. So
Easily.
oh no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but from a business
Go ahead.
perspective, we talk a little bit about how you did have this great role prior to jumping ship and living out the life that you have now with Master Talk. Completely inspiring. I'm curious though, what's next for you? What's next for Master Talk? What are the goals a year from now, 10 years from now? Where do you see yourself headed with Master Talk itself, and then whatever other ventures you decide to pursue? It's a loaded
For sure.
question, but
No, not at all. Not at all. I've gotten much worse. Trust me. This is a great question, actually. So, for me, Vinny, here's the way I explain my vision. Because, yes, I want to make more money. I want to scale my coaching practice so I can provide free content for everyone else. That's all great. But I would say the big ethos of my life is when Dale Carnegie, who's pretty much known as the godfather of public speaking, coaching, and training, the author of the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, he was super prolific in his time. But the challenge is he died in 1955, which means there's no podcast conversation like this with Dale Carnegie. There's no YouTube channel with Dale Carnegie speaking. There's no recordings of him even giving his workshops. And what's fascinating about the time period that we're living in right now, Vinny, is this is the first time in human history where any human being can record high quality video and sound for future generations. And that's an opportunity I take very seriously, especially now being a 27-year-old kid. Is for me, the focus for the rest of my life is how do I take all of my knowledge in my brain as I accumulate and share it in video so that when I'm dead, people can learn from me and study from me forever. That's really the goal of my ethos. Coaching clients just help me pay for the bigger vision, but that's really the ethos of my life.
you've kind of led me right into asking, but with that being the ethos of your life, outside of your work life outside of coaching, outside of speaking and putting out content? What is it that you pursue, and what is it that really gets you out of bed in the morning? I know that a lot of it probably weighs within the passion for public speaking and the passion for sharing that with the next generation. But what else weighs on your mind and weighs on your heart whenever you go about your day?
Yeah, for sure, Vinny. For me, like you said, I'm a pretty simple guy. I'm boring, dude. Outside of public speaking and master talk, that's what I spend most of my time doing. I mean, the other things you'll see me do is eating fried chicken with my cousins, watching horror movies with my family, going traveling to weird personal development conferences like a Tony Robbins conference or a Lewis Howes conference. That's pretty much how I spend my time. And and especially at podcast conversations like this, you could tell from looking at me how much fun I'm having. Like, this is really the breath. This is what brings me the most joy, and I'm so grateful that I have an opportunity most people don't. I was able to break myself free from corporate and spend 100% of my time doing something that I love. And sure, some things aren't perfect too. Sometimes I don't like getting on sales calls. Sometimes I got to do a little monotony, a little admin work. Sometimes I got to rework my sales funnel with my email sequence. So that stuff isn't as fun as everything else. But I think the big part is I get to spend 90% of it doing cool things. And yeah, sure, I like karaoke and dancing too. But I think that's the gist of it.
Well, if you're ever in Texas, we'll have to go sing some karaoke or go to a Tony Robbins conference, whichever one sounds more fun to you. I think I'm leaning towards the karaoke, but
I think the answer is both, honestly.
fair enough. Fair enough. Well, you kind of led me into another question that I typically like to ask my guests, and I think it's one that can really inspire people when they hear about the different reasons why people support one answer over the other, because I get a lot of both answers typically. And so, as someone who has seen the corporate world, now has started your own venture, has been very successful in that light, you've transitioned from a very daunting career in consulting that I know firsthand takes a lot of time into one that takes probably equal as much time, but also offers equal as much freedom. And so I'm curious, would you rather have more time or more money, and why?
Absolutely, Vinny. And the answer is more time, and I'll tell you why. I believed my whole life that money was more important than time. Always. Because I didn't grow up with a lot of money. My parents were factory workers. It was really hard for us to just afford $200 groceries. So for me, the reason I decided to become an accountant when I was 12 years old, 12 years old, Vinny. Everyone else, when they were 12, they wanted to be astronauts or comedians or actors. And I wrote accountant on my graduation album before I went to high school because I was really talented at math and I was really bad at everything else. So I told myself I could be an accountant, I could make money like crazy, and I could provide for my family. And you know what's funny, Vinny? I never changed my mind. Why did I go to business school to become an accountant? Why did I compete in case competitions? Because I had a passion for public speaking like you? No, I didn't. I did case competitions because somebody told me that people at PwC and KPMG and EY and Deloitte, the big four, the representatives are at these competitions. So if you do well, they'll give you a job. So I saw it as my ticket out of poverty. I didn't do it because I liked speaking. I wanted to get a job at those companies. And then I got the job and then I transitioned to IBM. And I'll be the first one to say this, Vinny. I loved working there. Most people hate their 9 to 5. I really enjoyed it because it gave me an opportunity to make ridiculous amounts of money, which in my case was 70, 80,000 back then. That sounded insane to me back then, right? When your mom and your dad are doing like $10 an hour and you're doing 35, you're like, Jesus Christ, like this is nuts. But after I started making 35 bucks an hour, Vinny, I learned a really important lesson and my equation flipped. I realized that groceries weren't actually that expensive. I learned that rent isn't actually that bad. Like if you're smart with your money, you know how to manage, you'll be okay. So I started developing excess money, maybe $500 here, $700 here. And that forced me, Vinny, to ask myself the bigger question, which is if I had all the money in the world, how would I spend my time? And I realized in an IBM meeting on like a Friday evening when I was tired out of my wits for leading like 3 implementations that week, I realized the answer was do MasterTalk full time. So that's why for me, time is way more valuable than money.
I like it. It's inspiring because oftentimes it takes people further into their career to realize something like that. At least from my experience, from what I've seen, from what I've heard from my guest. A lot of my younger, more successful people, similar to yourself, tend to tell me that money is more important now. And they even foresee themselves changing their minds as it gets later into their life because they'll have a different mindset at that point in time. But the reason that I see people say it most notably, and one that I almost tend to agree with until I hear someone describe it so eloquently like yourself, is the reason I'd rather have more money now is because if I make as much as possible in this moment while I'm young, it'll only expedite when I'm able to retire or have more time in the future. So by using all my time to make all this money now, eventually I will be able to pay it forward by using it to have more time in the future. I listened to a gentleman a long time ago during like a student council conference as like a high school student or maybe even junior high student. And they said, pay now and play later. That was all I remember from the talk. But it was like his way of saying, put in the work ahead of time and you'll be able to live lavishly or live comfortably in the future. But then he flipped it on its head and he was like, play now and you'll pay later. And so I just really like it kind of stuck with me. And like I said, I can't remember his name. I could tell you what he looked like and those two lines right there. But I think it kind of speaks to the same mantra of would you rather have more time or more money? Well, it just depends. What would you rather do now? Would you rather pay or would you rather play? And so I appreciate you sharing your insights into it. I think it'll resonate pretty well with our listeners. But before I let you go, I want to ask just if there was anything that we didn't talk about. I know I kind of go off on tangents here. I like for these to be more conversational, but if there's anything that you'd like to share about whether that be public speaking or anything in your life, feel free to hop on and share it now and tell the listeners what it is that you really want them to know about you.
Yeah, for sure, Vinny. Happy to share a concept called 80-20 questions. So 80-20 questions just means we all know the 80-20 principle, right? What are 20% of the actions that we can take in our life that drive 80% of the results? So I kind of spin this topic a little bit into what are 20% of the questions that we can ask ourselves about life that drive 80% of the clarity. Because I don't think you need to be successful to gain this clarity. I think the reason I got it so early was because I did something that most people in our 20s don't do, Vinny, or 30s or 40s or 50s, or honestly, at any age, which is ask yourself a difficult question about life every single day, and it'll set you free. Like the first day, you ask yourself a question like, hey, if you had all the money in the world, how would you spend your time? A lot of people, Vinny, they answer travel to that question. And I go, how long are you going to travel for? Then what? You're just going to travel on a plane, just going to live in a plane for 40 years? And they go, no. So they don't have a great answer to that question. Question number 2, if you could only accomplish 3 things in your life, and only 3 things, nothing more, what would you want to accomplish and why? And this helps you really focus on what actually matters to you in your life. And it's going to be different than everyone else's. And the third question, I won't overwhelm your audience too much, so I'll just give you 3 today, is from Devon Bandison, which is, what's a goal or a dream that you secretly gave up on and never told anyone about? So start reflecting on these questions, and it'll give you all the clarity you need to make the right decisions that make sense for your life.
I love it. I don't know that I'd ever heard those questions before, especially the last one. That one struck a chord with me. I like it a lot. I'm curious. You've mentioned quite a few different speakers or authors, whoever it may be. Are there any particular book or podcast recommendations that you throw out there for the listeners who might want to go give a listen or give a read to?
Yeah, for sure, Vinny. I'll share a book. So the book is called Thirst by Scott Harrison. Scott Harrison is the CEO and founder of Charity Water. It's a nonprofit he started to help the world gain access to clean water. I think the guy's one of the best storytellers in the world, and he's a great example of someone that can create impact in the world. The guy used to be a nightclub promoter in New York City, and he went on to build America's largest water charity. They raised $100 million in the last 12 months. I think Thirst is an exceptional read, and there's a great quote in the book that always sticks out in my mind, Vinny. And the quote is, "It only takes one person to have hope in the world, and why can't that person just be you?" And if you keep focusing on that hope that you can create for the world, that's by Pope Francis, I think you can make a big difference in the world.
I love it. I love it. Well, Brenden, it was absolutely great to have you on an episode today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and share with my listeners all of your wonderful insights. If people want to learn more about you and your work, where should they go to find you?
For sure, Vin. This is such a treat, by the way. Thanks for having me. So, two ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. Just type Master Talk in one word, and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak. And the second way to keep in touch is to come to one of my free communication workshops over Zoom. I do a free one every 2 weeks. It's live, it's interactive, and it's 90 minutes. And I facilitate the call myself. So if you want to go to that, go to rockstarcommunicator.com and just register for our next free training.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I will tag Brenden and MasterTalk's social media and YouTube channels in the show notes for today's episode. As always, if you want to learn more about our conversation, go check out the feature story on my blog, vinnyhale.com. And don't forget to follow the show on Instagram at uptothemic_pod. We will see you in the next one.
Let's go. Yeah. I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves